Welcome Wargamers. Today we're going to be discussing the latest 100 Kingdoms army box put out by Bellum for their use in games Conquest, Last Argument of Kings, and First Blood. If y'all are new to this, basically I take a starter product from the various games that I like to play and just kind of put them under a microscope, talking about like what is literally in the box. We're going to explore the profile behind all the units created. I haven't done this for the 100 Kingdoms again since the second edition dropped, so these War Scrolls are new for me. We'll talk about the box's overall value and really ask the question, is this a good place to start, right? When you have starter sets in the name, I have a different level of expectation, so we're going to discuss whether or not this is a good place to start playing the 100 King. Before we jump in, I just want to shout out here that if you'd like to save 10% on anything we talk about today, I do have an affiliate link in the description below. Again, it saves you 10% on anything store-wide and throws a little tip in my tip jar at no cost to you because Bellum is awesome to work with. So thank you so much to everyone who has used that link. So let's talk about what comes in the box. In this set, you will get 12 men-at-arms, that's 1 regiment, 3 household knights, because they're cavalry, that's 1 regiment, 3 mounted squires, 12 household guard or Gilded Legion. You could build them either way, but I do have a strong suggestion as to one. We'll get to that in a second. And the hero of the set is 1 mounted noble lord. Now here's the set as it appears at the time of recording for 150. It's still in pre-order because they decided to redo all of the 1-player starter sets. I'm going to be honest and say that I think that was a great idea. The sets that they have come out with for each faction I think are much more flavorful rather than here's just your cheap baseline troops. I think that these sets teach you great things about the game, and this one is no different. So there's a pick of your actual contents. All the regiments we listed, of course, you have to choose between household guard and the other here for this kit in the bottom left. But again, you do get the full rule books printed in color and everything for First Blood and Last Argument of Kings. This is a one-click buy. Now, looking at the set like this from sort of a bird's eye view, there's a few things that stand out to me immediately. One, all of these sets come kind of assembled to build a particular warband. So even though you have options on how to build the household guard in the bottom left, the other option that they can be cannot be taken by this hero. So this really is the highly suggested thing, unless you're buying this box to expand your existing force, in which case build whatever you want. But this, as described, is one complete warband. And it is obvious that they want to showcase one very important thing about this faction, the cavalry. Nobody has cavalry like the 100 Kingdoms. It is their thing. Most of what we would normally assume would be like monsters and stuff like that, or their equivalents rather, in the 100 Kingdoms take the form of different kinds of cavalry from different knightly orders, and it's pretty stinking cool. And this box, I think, does a great job of introducing that idea. Your basic troops are going to be those 2 regiments on the left, the men-at-arms and the household guard, and they do great. Household guard are a bit more offensive-y. They do great in ranks. We're going to get to their war scroll here in a little second. Men-at-arms are great objective holders, but what I'm really trying to stress here is that this is teaching you, the new 100 Kingdoms player, first of all, cavalry are important. It's more than half the box. And there's different kinds of cavalry, which I think is a very important lesson. So your mounted squires are very, very light, as your household guard knights, the ones right above them in this picture, are very, very heavy. I have a demo list here prepared. We're going to go through that in a little bit, but let's talk about the individual profiles. That's my overview. Like, the overview is, it's a great place to start. It comes with a one-click warband, you get all your rule books, and it's an emphasis on what makes the faction unique. Cavalry. In truth, I think it's a great box. It highlights, I think, a good mix of quality kits and lesser quality ones. When I say lesser quality, if you don't know, Bellum hasn't been around that long. Their first wave of models, the men-at-arms and the original Spire dudes from their first set, they aged fine. They look fine, but they're not nearly as tight and sharp as their newer models. And I feel like this set, instead of just recycling all the old stuff, does a good job of injecting new ones because those mounted squires look awesome. So with all that out of the way, let's go over to the shared screen and work out the actual unit entry. So let's start at the tippity top here. We got our mounted noble lord. He's going to be your hero for the set, and if you're somebody who, buys and paints in very small increments, he's going to be your hero for a little bit. He has a movement of 7, volley 1, doesn't matter, he's not rocking any weapons, or ranged weapons any. Clash of 3, attacks 5, wounds 5, resolve 3, defense 3, and evasion 0. For his special rules, he has brutal impact 2, which makes his charges really nasty. When a stand with this special rule inflicts impact attacks, those impact attacks reduce the enemy target's defense. It's essentially cleave or rend, whatever you want to call it, armor piercing. It negatively affects your opponent's defense modifier, but this is specifically on charge attacks, and I like that quite a bit. Impact 3, whenever he ends a charge move in base contact with something, he is going to be doing impact attacks. 3 of them, that's pretty dang good with Brutal 2. And he has shield, so +1 defense to him if the attack originates from his front arc. So he's functionally defense 4 provided you don't kind of have them out in the wind. Heirlooms are what the 100 Kingdoms call their artifacts. I'm not going to do too much with that. Honestly, they're kind of reserved for the 100 Kingdoms, specifically for the Mounted Noble Lord, because he does have a few quirks, but they're pretty cool. There's some good little things in there, especially if you're doing a combined arms with infantry and cavalry. Now, one thing that they've leaned into quite a bit in 2nd edition, which I really do like, is the idea of free upgrades. And that, I mean, lots of heroes in this game now come with this section called Weapon Arts. It's called something else for every unit, but whatever. It's essentially just saying, here's a free thing to add a little bit more uniqueness to your particular character. So you just go through this list, we can go through them here now, and you're just going to pick one of them. Again, it's free, but it makes them a little bit different to other Mounted Noble Lords. So the first one here is Weapon Master. You gain Cleave 1, which is quite tasty on those attacks that he has. The next option is Relentless, which gives him Flurry, so he can reroll all failed hits, which is another fantastic rule. Powerful Physique. This character adds +1 to its wound characteristic, which I've never been too fond of just because he tends to go with knights, and knights are kind of chonky. So, you know, I don't know. If something can evaporate an entire regiment of knights in one turn, this guy never stood a chance anyway. How about that for a logic? And then the last one here is Duelist. He gains Parry. Parry. All hit rolls of 1 made against a regiment with this special rule during a clash or duel action must be re-rolled. So you're re-rolling crit successes, basically. I kind of like that. As far as which one's the best, I don't have one for you in particular. However, I will point out that these do stack with heirlooms or masteries or anything like that you get, or spells that you cast on him. So, you know, you don't have to lock yourself into picking one and it'll always stay that way. You can change it game to game, try different kit outs for different weapons. Maybe you get a really awesome artifact weapon and now you want Weapon Master to give it, you know, an extra cleave or something. This one I think is more about freedom to make your guy do more of what you want your guy to do. If you want him to be tanky, there's defensive things. If you want him to be killy, there's that as well. We're going to skip masteries and go look at this little section here. Warband, Mainstay, Household Guard. We have those. Men at Arms. Hey, we have those. Mercenary Crossbowmen, Militia, Militia Bowmen, and Mounted Squires. Hey, we have those too. And for his restricted, Court Squires, Household Knights, and Longbowmen. So if you are not picking it up, this is all the things in your box. You have the Household Guard, the Men at Arms, and the Household Knights, as well as the Mounted Squires. Everything is here for you, and you have a choice between putting the Mounted Noble Lord with Knights or the Squires. I highly recommend the Knights. But to be honest, the Mounted Noble Lord, his most notable thing is giving you a lot of access to, you know, some basic cavalry regiments, as well as unlocking all your basic infantry. So he's a great choice to have early on, because even if you expand beyond him later on, you're going to eventually need, you know, Men at Arms, Crossbowmen, Militia, like all these chumps, and it's just good to have a hero who can bring those, as well as some heavy hitters in the form of cavalry. However, he does not act as much of a force multiplier. You know, like the Priory Commander, he's also a lord on, or kind of a hero level character on horse. He does a lot for his folks. The mages obviously can cast spells and give bonuses. There's just, I feel, a little bit more going on with some of the other heroes, but this is a very solid choice for your first starter set because, frankly, there's not a ton of complicated rules to him, and he unlocks a lot of the army building options that you would want. Like I said, the chumps to fill out your list. That being said, I have taken multiple charges from a unit of Household Guard with a Mounted Noble Lord in it, and every single one of them has hurt. And I'm sure my descendants will still feel the burn. Moving on to the Men at Arms, because I like to start at the bottom when it comes to reviewing units. These guys are your cheapest chumps. Not literally, the militia take that role, but Men at Arms have a few, they're just above like absolute minimum in my opinion. They have a movement of 5, volley 1, clash 2, attacks 4 per stand, which is cool, 4 wounds, 2 resolve, 2 defense, and 0 evade. Their only special rule here is shield, meaning they +1 defense to the front, so they're functionally defense 3. Now the only thing really notable about these guys is they actually do make really good objective holders because you don't really have to worry about them all that much, and they do have 2 officer options that don't come in this set but are worth thinking about. The first one is the Seasoned Veteran, and he grants Bastion, which further increases their defense by 1. It's a draw event, so you have to activate him first, but That's a great way to like burn some activations early on if you want to see what your opponent does. You flip the officer, boom, men-at-arms are now up to defense 4 from the front. That's pretty cool. And then there is the Neophyte, which gives them the rule Devout. This really only matters when you start dipping into some of the other heroes that have prayers and stuff like that. Devout makes it easier for you to receive positive blessings. Essentially, if someone has a buff that they put on this unit, you get an extra, success. Between the two, Seasoned Veteran wins every time. It's an opinion thing. Of course, as more stuff comes out for like the Priory Commander, that might change. Now, you only get 12 of these guys one regiment of 3 stands, meaning 12 dudes, in regards to this particular set. However, bumping them up to 6 stands makes them a great tar pit because it's just a lot to chew through. Or you can keep them where they are, get another one, and just have them go run for objectives on opposite sides of the table. They are just enough of a pain to be hard enough for your opponent to remove them. They have to overextend themselves. That's been my review of Men-at-Arms from the times that I've played with them. Alright, so next we're going to talk about the Gilded Legion. This is one of the 2 options you can build from the, I've been calling them a Household Guard kit. It's both. Gilded Legion, Household Guard can be built from the same kit. And while I do think they both have awesome merits within any 100 Kingdoms army, I need to make it very clear that the Gilded Legion is not a regiment that is an option available to the Mounted Lord. So if you build them this way, play them as, don't feel bad, certainly. Play them as Household Guard rules-wise, because they look very similar, and that way your army can be cohesive and work within how the Warband rules do. But that being said, once you, expand your collection and you can take the Gilded Legion, they're really cool troops. You got a movement 5, volley 1, clash 3, 4 attacks, 4 wounds, 4 resolve, which is wonderful, defense 3, and evasion 0. Gilded Legion also have Iron Discipline as a special rule. When you are engaged or suffer wounds from the sides or rear, it does not lose the support rule and does not reroll successful morale tests. I have that on some of my Dweghome guys, and it's fantastic. It just lets you throw them wherever you want, and you don't care about any of the penalties. Cleave 1, that's wonderful. Support 2, so every stand that's not engaged is going to be contributing 2 attack instead of 1 like everybody else. For their options, they also have a Seasoned Veteran, again granting Bastion, so they would be defense 4 at that point. And then they also have access to someone called the Drill Master. The regiment adds +1 to its attack characteristic and gains double time draw event. So the double time draw event, if the regiment performs 2 march actions during its activation, it may make a free additional march action. So you can ram these guys up the board. They are heavy infantry, so that does matter for when they'll come on the table, but if you like them, the Drill Master will get your heavy infantry up that board real fast. Taking a look at the default option, right, the Household Guard, this is what I suggest you build. You have, they're a medium troop, so they're going to come in pretty early on, I think, depending on if you want them to auto come on or not. You have a movement of 5, volley 1, clash 2, 4 attacks, 4 wounds, 3 resolve, defense 3, and evasion 0. So they lose a little bit when it comes to resolve, but let's take a look here. They still have cleave 1 and support 2. But they lose Iron Discipline, so they do care if people come at them from the flank or the rear. That's important. And really, that's basically about it, guys. They also have, a standard bearer they can take, and they have 1 officer option. The regiment re-rolls failed hit rolls of 6 during clash actions, which is good. And then it says, whilst, look at that, oh my god. Whilst a noble lord character stand is attached to this regiment, the regiment adds +1 to its clash characteristic instead. So you can either have them re-rolling 6s, which is great, that is a great rule, or +1 clash depending on if you put a hero. Of course, for our purposes in the starter set, we don't have a foot hero who can go with them. But these, much like your men-at-arms, make up some basic chumps. I will say, however, the Household Guard do have some potential to deliver some punishment, simply because of how many ranks they can go in and the support rule, along with cleave 1, because the men-at-arms don't have that. My advice is more of the same, but I think these guys have a little bit more staying power than some of the men-at-arms builds that I've seen. Next, we have the Mounted Squires, because I'm tired of talking about infantry. We need to talk about some dudes on horses like our lord here, right? So Mounted Squires, these really are your light cavalry options. In fact, those are the 2 keywords they have right at the top. They are light and they are cavalry. They have a movement of 9, volley 1, Clash 2. These are not meant to be fighters, they are scouts. With 4 attacks, 4 wounds, 2 resolve, 2 defense, and 0 evade. They come with a few special rules. First one is shield, so again, they're functionally defense 3 from the front, and impact 1, because apparently they just have ponies or something instead of full horses. So impact 1. They can of course have a hero, standard bearer, which may or may not be useful, and they have one officer option called the Count Palatine, I believe it's pronounced. The regiment always counts as having the inspired special rule, so it essentially just bumps them up to Clash 3. Now that's what it does in practice, but remember that doesn't mean that when they charge they don't get inspired, because they are inspired and so on. So there's a few things to remember with that. So why are the mounted Squires good at all? Well, I like them for 2 reasons. One, as a harassing force. If you can bring them out onto a flank, your opponent will have to turn, because while they're not scary, everything is scary when you take a charge from it in the side or the rear, meaning, this is a movement rank and flank game. If this guy gets on the side of you and hits you from the side, you're going to have a bad time. Not that he's going to do a ton, but your regiment is functionally pinned down in a really weird place, and it's going to take you at least a turn to combat reform and hopefully beat them. But if you spend the turn combat reforming, you'd rather be clashing to hurt these guys, because that's 12 wounds just sitting right there at you. They could go around and hunt archer units. Again, they don't need to be strong to fight archer units. They could absorb the initial charge from your opponent so that your household knights behind them can then countercharge. Like, they just are really meant to be a piece that is traded, is essentially what I'm saying, and how you trade that piece out is going to determine how effective they really are. Personally, I wouldn't even waste the 10 points for the Count Palatine unless it's a really cool mini officer that they made. I think these guys work best as being dirt cheap, rushing forward and pinning in your opponent where you need them to be. And last regiment here are the Household Knights Cavalry, and they are medium, meaning these can cap objectives when the Squires can't. They have a movement of 7, volley 1, clash 2, 5 attacks, 4 wounds, resolve 3, defense 3, evasion 0. Little tiny mini tank. With them, because they don't use ponies, they have impact 3, which is wonderful. Brutal impact 1, we talked about that with the hero, which essentially it's rend when you charge into something, your impact hit. And they also have shield, so defense 4 from the front. They can take a leader, a standard bearer as normal, but they also have a unique officer called the Tourney Champion. This regiment adds +2 to its charge distances. I love this. Okay, for me personally, the best way that I've seen Household Knights played is in groups of 6, because he basically made 2 large Household Knight bricks, which is it can be very expensive, but they're mean. And they're mean for a reason, because if you can deliver that brick into your opponent's line, you can really set the line of engagement as far back as you want. With the movement of 7, you're essentially moving the battlefield up your opponent's nose. Now they will die. I mean, they're not the heaviest, most indestructible thing. Compared to a lot of the stuff in other starter boxes, they're pretty dang good, but I just think that these guys are awesome. Bricks of them are gross and very aggressive, but a lot of their efficiency is based upon the charge. Like, if you don't get the charge, or if you get charge, which is the worst scenario, you're going to find that they kind of hit like wet blankets. They don't have any way of like doing much cleave, on their own, like in terms of upgrades and stuff like that. They're not going to be just cutting through stuff unless they're on the charge. Now, that is it for the actual review of the minis that you get in the set. Kind of taking a step back, my initial thesis, I still stand by it. I think it's designed to introduce you to the game with all your rulebooks, give you a fully functional warband, assuming you chose Household Guard, and start you playing 100 Kingdoms knowing that cavalry is king. With that being said, I did put together a very, very simple list. It's just 650, and this is kind of what I would do for like demos or early games for sure, where it's just literally the units that they gave you: your mounted noble lord, squires, men-at-arms, household guard, household knights. You put the noble lord with the knights, of course, and I added the heirloom Lorraine lance, which basically makes him really nasty on the charge, even more so than his base rules, as well as weapon master. So even though he's stuck in, he can still be nasty. Beyond that, I went and added some unit upgrades. For example, I put a standard bearer on the knights. That was, I think, the only one I really did that with. Oh no, I did it with the household guard as well. Simply because I want these 2 units to be charging. I want the other ones to be more reserved or for harassing. But yes, if I was going to give a demo and someone, they probably knew more than just the raw basics of the game, I would probably give them a list like this and be like, beat me, come at me. And so coming to the end of the review, let's do some final chats. The thing about this set is what you're not gaining access to. By that I mean it doesn't teach you certain things of the game. It doesn't teach you magic. It doesn't teach you ranged attacks because no one here really has them. Stuff like that. But what it does teach you is it's going to be a lot of flanking, a lot of movement focus, because these cavalry have such longer distances than some of the other units that come in starter set. Now, one thing that I found very interesting is that all of these regiments can actually be taken with the noble lord on foot as well. So if you are incrementally learning the game and you wanted to try something subtle but different, you could just switch the heroes, keep the regiment exactly the same. Now you have a foot commander, you can put him with the men-at-arms or the household guard. So what are the final thoughts on the set as a whole? Monetarily wise, for 150, I think it is a good starter place just because it does give you enough regiments for your dollar, all the rule books you need, that kind of thing. The model kits go together very simply. You're going to feel the difference between the older ones, specifically the men-at-arms, and the newer ones, specifically the mounted squires. Like, that is the full range of Parabellum's growth in the last 3 years. So you will notice the difference, but that being said, all of these are regiments that 100 Kingdoms players use very regularly. Like, they're just staples of the army. So having those is never a bad thing. Expanding from here, you know, I made that list for 650. I would probably find a way to add in maybe some archers. Let me see, the chapter mage is 80 point. Yeah, I would maybe throw her, and she can do what? Mercenary crossbowman as a mainstay. Just plug that in. At least gives you access to play in all phases of the game, with all the different rules rather, and gives you some more exposure to the different mechanics within Conquest. If you are a 100 Kingdoms player, please let me know what you would suggest new folks go toward. I always pin the most helpful comments to the top, and I just really rely on you guys. So thank you guys so much for listening and hanging out with me today. I'll catch you next time in my next starter set review. Happy wargaming.